Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Capital Control Show. I'm your host, Derek Gruning, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to ask for a quick favor. Could you like, share, and subscribe to these podcasts and episodes as we're providing more and more value for our listeners each week? I hope that this week is no exception. We're going to take a little bit of a deviation from some of the topics that we've been discussing in Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, but it's not a far deviation. We're going to broaden our perspective. We're going to start thinking intergenerationally, start thinking about your family and how you can be implementing the infinite banking process at a larger scale across multiple generations. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we are talking about the 5 phases of family wealth planning. And just a few quick caveats as we get started. You may be in 1 or 2 or potentially 3 of these phases at any given time, and maybe even all 5. And especially as you begin to think about your family across generations, you're definitely going to see that many members in your family are actively engaged in each of these 5 phases of family wealth planning. Now, are there more than 5? Possibly, but I've just narrowed it down to just these 5 to help set a framework and foundation for the rest of this discussion. As we go on in future episodes, I'm going to be diving a little bit deeper into each of these 5 phases independently, and as always, to provide you with more information and context of how the infinite banking concept can apply to each of these 5 phases of your family wealth planning strategies. So what is the family wealth plan, or what is family wealth planning? Well, I like to actually describe it as the legacy bank, where we are building a family banking system as one large unit to where we are able to keep the income and as much of our wealth inside of our family at any given time. If you think about the ways that we've discussed in previous episodes, how much of our dollars are being sent away from our personal economy, out of our control, and into the hands of other people for them to enjoy rather than us to receive the maximum amount of benefits. So here's just a little graphic to describe what I'm talking about. I'm thinking cyclically. I'm thinking in cycles or generations of grandparents providing for their children and building their wealth up, and then those children are then going to provide for the next generation, and this is going to continue to cycle and stay within the family unit for as long as possible to continue to grow the capital base for this family to utilize for, one, their own personal needs of banking, potentially as an income source in retirement years, but more so as an investment opportunity for them to pull capital from these strategies and utilize it for other investments or businesses along the way. We're going to take a look, as always, at an example towards the end of this video, and I hope that you'll find it very informative and educational, and to be able to begin to realize how you could implement this in your personal economy at the scale that is suitable for what you are able to accomplish. So the first phase of this strategy is you need to save. Or I just describe it as save it. You need to save your income. And of course, that's going to come with the question of how much, or how do I save, or where should I save my income? Now, this is going to obviously differ for every individual and, of course, for their families as well. As we've discussed in other episodes, the national savings rate is very low at this current time, around 3.5% to 4%. And I think it needs to be much higher than that. If you can consider your grandparents and what were their mentalities and habits with money, how much were they saving in their generation? And I think you'll find it's going to be much closer to maybe even 15 to 20%. And that's where I think most individuals should try to and strive to be at, is that mark. Now, me personally, I'm trying to exceed that. I want to save as much of my income as possible. And am I giving up current life status to do it? Well, potentially, but I realize that there's going to be a maximum amount of benefit if I can defer some of that enjoyment today in order to enjoy it later on in life. Now, how do I save? Personally, I think the best avenue to save would be within a specially designed whole life insurance contract. Now, notice I say save and not invest. Life insurance is not an investment, but it can be utilized for investing purposes. But it is a great place to warehouse your wealth, to store as much capital in that asset as possible. In future episodes, we'll look at this in particular. What are the other ways that people are saving today? It might be in a money market account. It might be through CDs or just your typical savings account from your commercial bank. And in that episode, we'll actually look deep into see, are those strategies the best place to save your wealth, or would utilizing an infinite banking type policy serve you better? Here's a little graph, I guess, to describe what it is that people are doing with their finances. This is very typical of Americans today, where we are drowning in debt and we are addicted to debt, as we've described in other episodes when we were describing the problem, as Nelson Nash calls it. Here we see the debtor is they're taking out a large amount of debt, and as they're paying it back, they're getting back to the zero mark, but they're never really gaining wealth. Likewise, you'll see the saver. This would be the individuals who like to pay cash up front for things rather than take on debt. This would be very similar to the advice that Dave Ramsey would be recommending or encouraging his listeners to. But what about the green line? Can we do that? Can we compound our wealth in such a way that we're actually growing over time, as opposed to just saving our dollars and then disrupting that compounding by liquidating our bank account to purchase a car or pay for college or whatever life things you need? Here would be another example of that chart as well. Here we'll see the saving and spending in traditional banks, as we've described, as like paying cash for things, versus infinite banking with whole life insurance, where we're actually growing at a compounding rate. Even though we're taking loans from our policy, our cash value is continuing to compound uninterrupted, as opposed to the traditional way of paying cash for things, where you are interrupting that compounding every time you need to buy something. The second phase, you need to protect it. Once you've saved your wealth, you need to find a way to protect it. And the question would be, from who and how do you do that? The biggest one institution that you need to protect your wealth from is the IRS. The amount that the IRS is taxing family members and individuals is ridiculous, in my opinion. And it's never been quite so high. Just the amount of taxes overall that people are paying. And so we need to build our wealth in such a way that we can keep the tax man away from it. And we also have other creditors and potential nefarious people who might sue you. You need to find a way to warehouse your wealth, to keep it out of the hands and off the books of other people, so that they know that you basically have zero assets or none that they can go after and win in court. And utilizing life insurance as that chassis, as that vehicle, is a great way to keep your wealth off the books and off the radars of other institutions and away from the hands of people who may be trying to sue you. All right, we've saved our wealth. We're beginning to protect our wealth. Now we need to grow it. And how? How do we grow it? Well, I think there's a few important comments that need to be made that many people don't take for granted, but we should be figuring out a way, how do I control it first as it's growing? And do it in such a way that it is liquid and accessible and easy for me to get access to. I don't have to wait in line at a bank. I don't have to wait for several weeks or months potentially for an application to get approved. I can access my wealth in the click of a button. And I can do it in such a way that it is not taxed and there are no fees associated with it. Now, counteract that with your 401k or IRAs, right? You're locking those dollars up in those accounts, making it very difficult to gain access to them. And if you need to, you're likely going to be paying a penalty and potentially some taxes as well. So by utilizing these life insurance policies as the foundation of your legacy bank, you're able to grow it and access it for future opportunities without triggering taxes, penalties, or fees. All along the way, you are in total control and have total access and liquidity as needed. Now we need to use it, or potentially spend it, or enjoy it. This is going to differ for each individual and the phase that they are in life. For some of you, you may be looking at, how can I draw income, passive income, in a tax-free and penalty-free manner once I reach retirement age? And the best way to do that, as we've looked in other cases here, is to actually utilize these whole life insurance contracts as a safe asset in conjunction potentially with your other assets for retirement income. In a future episode, we're going to be looking at a Monte Carlo simulation as to how your stock portfolio might provide income for you in retirement, even though markets can fluctuate and go up and down. What are the risks and how likely are you going to be to run out of money in your retirement years? And we're going to counteract that with what happens if I had an infinite banking type policy, and how can I access those funds? What would that do to my long-term wealth planning? And would it provide me more security and stability in my retirement years so that I'm able to weather the storms when the stock market goes up and down. Secondly, we should also look at how do we utilize the policy loans for your banking needs. And as we've described in other episodes, this could mean paying for cars, houses, college, weddings, you name it. Anything that you finance, could be furniture or home improvements. Anything that you use a traditional bank for, you can utilize your policy loans for. And by doing so, you are in a position where you can recapture the interest that would have been paid to other banks and instead is flowing back into your personal economy, allowing it to grow and compound even greater. Just think about how much money on your home mortgage that you will spend over your lifetime. And by paying it to a different bank, you've given up the compounding that could be earned on each of those dollars for 30 plus years. Never to be recycled and reused and sent back into your personal economy ever again. Those dollars are gone, vanished from your grasp and your control. And so you've given up the ability to earn a compounding return on those dollars. But by utilizing the infinite banking process, you can recapture it as we've described in other episodes. The last phase, we need to leave it. We need to leave our wealth, but not just our financial wealth. We need to look at it as a holistic legacy, and we'll describe some of those features here in just a minute. But think about this. It seems to be unconventional in today's world to even think about future generations and leaving a financial legacy for them, to provide them with a jump start, potentially to starting businesses or taking on more investments, to make the next generation better than you were. For whatever reason, that just doesn't seem to sound appealing to people. And it seems difficult to grasp and grab hold of as to how you can do that. We'll take a look at an example here in just a minute. I want to introduce to you the legacy bank. Now, this is my term. This is what I think of when I'm considering your overall family wealth plan. I'm looking at and describing three different pillars here. First is the pillar of the culture, the family culture. The second pillar is your capital. And this is not just financial. It's not just dollars and cents. There's much more to each of these pillars, and we'll describe in future episodes. The third pillar is continuity. How do I continue this legacy for generations to come? And not just one or two. I'm talking maybe 5, 7, 10 generations from now. How can I continue this idea of building your own family legacy bank? And it stands on these three foundations of culture, capital, and continuity. But of course, we're going to describe the financial pillar of the capital foundation for your legacy bank. And here I'm describing it as managing those financial resources as faithful stewards of God, utilizing family banking strategies to optimize your cash flow, to build wealth and advance God's kingdom purposes. You can do this with your dollars and cents, with your net worth. You can do this with your wealth and we want to teach you how to be a faithful steward of this wealth. Do it in such a way to optimize your efficiency and cash flow, building wealth over time. And ultimately, it's for God's kingdom and for His glory alone. So how is this done? Well, you need to ask yourself actually a different question. How much of your income is already leaving your legacy bank? How much income were you able to save relative to your overall income? And I want to introduce to you this idea of shopping at home or keeping it in the family. Shopping at home would be as you've capitalized your banking system, now you can utilize those funds for your banking needs and keeping those dollars circulating in your personal economy rather than what they used to be doing, which was you were sending those dollars away to other bankers for them to earn interest and dividends on, rather than you being able to capture that and keep it in the family for generations to come. Next, we're going to look at this example here. We've already looked at this graphic of the family wealth plan where we're thinking in 3 generations, but this could be broadened and expanded to multiple generations. And I think that's where this strategy gets the most power, bang for your buck, is when you start thinking not only 1 or 2 generations from now, but thinking 7 to 10 generations from now. And utilizing a whole life insurance contract as that foundation environment. So we're going to design 3 policies. This first one is going to be on Grandpa. Grandpa started this policy at age 60. And you're going to see in each of these 3 policies, the age is relatively similar to each other. and so is the premium. And I'll explain that here in a minute. But I wanted to just say that you are never too old to start the infinite banking concept and utilizing this to build your legacy bank. Here's an example of a 60-year-old, somebody who's about to potentially enter retirement. And how can he better impact his family's future wealth? And it starts with him gaining a whole life insurance policy on himself, even though he's 60 years old. Many people think that that's too old to get started. He wouldn't qualify for life insurance. Well, that's not the case. We do need to look at your overall health and wealth, but we know that people even in their 60s and 70s can be utilizing these strategies. So he's going to fund a policy, and that premium amount is going to be $20,000 per year. Now, that may not be applicable to you in your personal financial situation, but this is just meant to be an example of what could happen in the future. And these dollars will vary based on your individual scenario, and the premium may be much lower or it may be much greater. It's all going to depend. In this example, however, we're going to assume that Grandpa passes away at age 80. He's funded the policy for 20 years, and he's paid a cumulative premium of $400,000 out of his own pockets. And in return, the family is going to receive a tax-free death benefit of $734,247. Now, what do we do with that tax-free death benefit? We're going to start another policy. This time, we're going to start it on Dad, the next generation in line. And he's starting this policy at age 55, still relatively close to age 60 as Grandpa was. And we're going to utilize this tax-free death benefit to fund the policy for the first 7 years. So Dad really won't have to come out of his own pocket until age 62. Then his out-of-pocket premium is $36,000 per year. And you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, why? Why $36,000? Well, I'm calculating a 3% increase of inflation annually. And to do this, $20,000 at 3% over 27 years, you're going to see that $36,000 premium is relatively similar. And again, Dad, we're going to assume passes away at age 80. So this policy has been in force for 25 years. His out-of-pocket cumulative premium was $828,000, even though we already utilized an additional $734,000 to fund the policy for the first 7 years. And when Dad passes away at age 80, the tax-free death benefit to the next generation is over $4.5 million. And of course, you guessed it. What are we going to do with that tax-free death benefit? We're going to fund the next generation's policies. And at this time, those kids are now starting policies at age 55. We're going to utilize that $4.5 million death benefit, and it's going to fund the policy for 7 years. Then the out-of-pocket premium is going to be $77,000 per year. Once again, adjusting for inflation, it's about the same purchasing power, assuming a 3% annual inflation rate. Now, this generation of kids passes away at age 80. The cumulative out-of-pocket premium is $1.5 million, and the tax-free death benefit is $20,698,000 to the next generation to continue to compound this and keep the wealth in the family. Now, this family hasn't even utilized policy loans. This is just the compounding and the growth that can happen in whole life insurance contracts when you start thinking across many generations. They haven't utilized the policy loans to fund businesses or to recapture debt and interest that they were paying to other banks. They haven't utilized these policy loans for other investments, potentially real estate or even stock market or options trading or you name it. All they've done is they've utilized this as a place to store their wealth. Instead of it going to commercial banks, they're storing it in their life insurance contracts. Now let's take a little bit deeper dive into these numbers. The total legacy bank across just 3 generations, the total out-of-pocket premium, what was actually paid out of pocket from each of these generations, was $2,771,000. And the total death benefit, $20.7 million. That's insane. Look at that efficiency. For every dollar that they've paid in premium, there's almost $10 back in total death benefit. That's like you giving me a dime, and in return, I'm going to give you a full dollar. All along the way, that last generation had $14 million of cash value that they could utilize. And as I've said, that could be refinancing things, that could be investing in opportunities, purchasing equipment, starting their own businesses, expanding their businesses. They've got access to large amounts of capital. But what about inflation? Inflation is a silent killer. It's a silent tax, really, that can destroy your wealth. How does this policy affected by inflation, and how does it outpace inflation? What can those generations expect in the future? And let's really dig into the numbers here. This is where this gets really exciting. All right, so as I've already described, we're assuming a 3% flat inflation over 80 years. Of course, inflation is going to go up and down over those 80 years, but generally it's assumed that the inflation rate fluctuates relatively close to that 3% mark. In reality, I think it's much higher than that, but for this calculation, we're going to assume 3%, as is pretty standard across financial planning. The net present value, let me explain that. What we're doing is we're going to take the premium dollars over those 80 years that they've paid, and we're going to bring it to the present. What is the current value today, assuming that discount rate of a 3% inflation? What would those out-of-pocket premiums be worth today, even though they were spread across 80 years? Well, here we can see that that's actually a $758, almost $759,000 of net present value of premium paid today. And in return, there's a net present value of a guaranteed death benefit of over $1.1 million. How about the non-guaranteed? Of course, this is life insurance. The profitability of these companies go up and down. The dividend rate changes over time. Interest rates will change over time and fluctuate. So this is, of course, an example, an illustration of what could theoretically happen, even though it's not very likely to happen verbatim as is illustrated. But just to get an idea, I want to introduce that concept to you of thinking generationally. What would happen or could potentially happen? A net present value of non-guaranteed death benefit of over $1.9 million today. Now imagine that. You paid me $759,000 today, and in return, you're going to receive from me $1.9 million today. You are instantly building wealth just by utilizing a specially designed life insurance contract. And you're going to do it in such a way that can be shared and spread across many generations. Let's look at the efficiency of those dollars. For every dollar of net present value premium paid today, how much death benefit are you getting? Well, in this instance here, the net present value of those premiums to guaranteed death benefit is 64%. That's as if saying, you paid me 64 cents today, and in return, you received $1 today. Who wouldn't want that in your financial picture? You pay me 64 cents, and in return, you're guaranteed to get $1 back. Now, what about the non-guaranteed side? If the illustrations were to perform exactly as illustrated, which of course we've just said is not highly likely, but as a potential likelihood, now that efficiency ratio goes to 39%. You paid me 39 cents, and I'm giving you $1 back. That's true wealth. That's financial capital for future generations. And you get to utilize this all along the way. You get to enjoy it all along the way and pass it on to the next generations. And this is only 3 generations from now. That's insane to consider what this could be like, how those numbers could grow in 5 to 7 or even 10 generations from now. And that's really building a legacy worth living. And we need to couple this with our culture, our capital, and continuity to build your legacy bank. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have putting this together, and just to think what it would be like if I made that commitment today of giving 39 cents, paying that in premium, and in return, instantly receiving $1. That is true efficiency. That is where wealth can really compound over time. And once we start thinking about recapturing that interest and allowing these policies to really expand and grow over many, many generations, this is where true wealth is had. And this is why so many wealthy individuals are utilizing this strategy. And as I've said before, your numbers may not apply specifically to this scenario here. And that doesn't matter. The principles, the concept are all going to remain the same. This can be done, and it can be done for you at any level. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter how much income you have. This can be done. It's just a matter of scale and scaling it up. So if you are interested in learning how to start your family bank or your legacy bank and become your own banker, please reach out to me, Derek Gruning, and I'd be happy to help you. You can find me and reach out at derek@capitalcontrol.org and our website, capitalcontrol.org, and we'd be happy to schedule a free 30-minute consultation and a strategy session with you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and when consider sharing, and subscribing to the podcast and YouTube channel. Share this with your friends and family, as I'm sure they would love to see this content of what could happen in their own family, allowing this wealth to stay in the family and to keep it at home. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.